Welcome to the Glass Lab podcast, where we talk all things product development. It's our goal every month to introduce you to the people, ideas, and development tools that are shaping the hardware products we all use every day. Hi, everybody. I'm Drew Westchick, your host and CTO here at Glassboard. And on today's episode, I have Emily Krueger, who is the president and CEO here at 16 Tech, where we're actually at. We shoot all of our episodes at 16 Tech. So this is super great to finally have you on the show. And also here, as usual, CEO at Glassboard, Grant Chapman. So fantastic to finally, get you on the podcast, Emily, and just super eager to talk about, 16 Tech. I think this has been something that's been a long time coming. Grant and I for sure have been following it for a number of years. I know that there were people following it even before us. So really eager just to talk today about what is 16 Tech, and to talk about your role here and kind of all the great, amazing things that we know is planned for the future, but I don't know that everybody else necessarily knows.
That's great. Well, I'm really excited to be with you this afternoon, and we're thrilled to have Glassboard in Machyne and as part of the broader ecosystem that we're developing at 16 Tech.
No, it's awesome to be here, and it's so meta that we're filming this here, meeting with you. It's all in one.
That's right. Yeah, I'm having flashbacks, Grant, because I think the first time that I heard or met anyone from the Glassboard team was in 2018, shortly after I started at 16 Tech. And at that point, there was no place to meet in the district. We were meeting in a conference room in a building downtown.
I say, was it the downtown meeting or the one at Googman House where it was like the real unveil with
I think the first one was in the conference room, and then later at Googman.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. No, so we've all been working around this dream together for quite some time, and we've been really excited to see how we can get involved. And now that we are, it's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'd love to ask, what brought you to 16 Tech before we jump into what it is?
Sure.
So what's your background and what got you to join this crazy adventure?
Yeah. Well, in many respects, my career has been about making Indiana better. And I never started out with that as the aim. That's just one of those themes that when you look backwards, you kind of realize. And I started my career working on Capitol Hill for Senator Lugar, who was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at the time. And I started at the lowest rung of the ladder, which was a staff assistant, answering phones, giving tours of the Capitol building, helping with correspondence, et cetera. But I spent 5 years with Lugar's office before I went and I got my MBA, and it was just a really formative experience for me. I ended up being promoted very quickly as a press secretary. I was a deputy chief of staff, and in many respects, my experiences on the Hill kind of set me on a trajectory that I've been in subsequently, where I was oftentimes the person who was given a direction and marshaling people and resources to achieve some type of outcome. So early in my career, that meant I was figuring out how to bring Indy Racing League cars up to Capitol Hill when the Indy Racing League switched to ethanol. Later in my career with Lugar, I helped open a community service center where for the first time we had a retail storefront and launched a whole bunch of community volunteer programs through it. And then I ended my tenure with the senator managing his last re-election campaign. And that's eventually what brought me back to Indianapolis in late 2010.
Oh, awesome.
That's great. I mean, I think what's really cool about him particularly is almost like, I call it like a gravity well of talent, right? Like I know so many talented people that started in and around either his office or his campaign or now his like legacy. I know that he's got like a foundation of his own and there's some really great people working over there, but like it's really cool whenever I hear somebody that's like connected to that, because it does seem like there's been a lot of people that have been in that ecosystem that are now leaders throughout like Indiana or hold like positions, here in the local area and elsewhere. So it's always like cool to see, obviously like he served for a very long time here in Indiana. Like, I mean, that name is very familiar here, but it's also cool to see how many people are sort of like continuing that legacy in terms of like the work that they're doing today.
Yeah, it was a really formative experience for me. And there's a Lugar alumni, just as you find with many other elected officials as well, from some of the great leaders that we've had, here in the state. And for me, one of the impressions that Lugar really made on me is, he believed good ideas can come from anywhere. And he was known for his bipartisanship and his approach, but I saw him live that out on a daily basis. And that really struck with me. It didn't matter what someone's political ideology was or where they were coming from. He would sit and listen to them. And that's something that I've really carried with me and embraced. And then I also learned lots of personal lessons, watching and observing someone of working at his level with incredible integrity and discipline that I've brought forward in many respects in the ways I try and approach my work.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I think creating what Grant and I call, and I'm sure others do, like a very horizontal instead of a very vertical organization. I think it's difficult to do. I think it's actually much harder to build kind of a flat organization where you do take input from lots of different people, potentially people that aren't at a level where they normally get to have that kind of influence or input. But I think you and I would agree that there's a ton of value in trying to do it that way, because truly it's a game of ideas, not necessarily a game of influence or, how long you've been working somewhere, right? Like things like that. It really comes down to, like you said, a great idea really can come from anywhere, and you don't have to be, in the organization for 15 years to finally rise to a level where your ideas get put into action.
Yeah, and actually that's a great segue, because during my time on the Hill, I found myself being most attracted to people who are coming up to the Hill from the private sector, because they were coming up with ideas, and they were ideas that would have large impact on society, and I was really intrigued by that. And so after about 5 years on the Hill, I looked around and I realized there wasn't a job that I wanted. I wasn't interested in being a lifelong Hill staffer, and so for me, that's what compelled me to go to business school. And so I spent 2 years at the Kellogg School of Management and got my MBA. I did the revolving door thing. I was back in DC for a little bit
Sure.
afterwards, but eventually made my transition and worked for LDI, which is a privately owned company based here in Indianapolis, functions like a private equity firm. And for me, that was a great experience, kind of like MBA finishing school, because I got to help evaluate acquisition opportunities for the company and then work with the portfolio companies as well. And so during my tenure with LDI, I got to work with companies of different sizes, different industries, multiple leadership teams, et cetera, and really, really enjoyed that. And so for me, the opportunity to join 16 Tech was kind of the culmination of these things, where it was an opportunity to return to an organization and a job that has community benefit. It was an opportunity to do something new and exciting. 16 Tech Community Corporation has been a startup as well. And so I was the second full-time employee, and we've gone through the startup journey on our own. And so for me, it was really compelling to do something that would have a tangible impact on our city. And one of the other little factors I'll share too is, I grew up primarily in Pennsylvania. I was born in Indianapolis. Most of my friends are coastal, and so I've got a bit of a chip on my shoulder when it comes to Indy, because I've had lots of people ask me over the years, and question why I've made my career and my home here. And 16 Tech is actually a place for me to show in a much broader, wider way how Indiana is a great place to start a business, to raise your family, to make your career. And so that's something that fuels me in the work that we do as well.
No, I definitely empathize with that. So I'm Indianapolis native, born and raised in Zionsville, went to Purdue, came back. Now I live downtown, work downtown. But my wife is Swiss, and every day she's like, why did I agree to move here from Switzerland? I'm like, it's awesome, it's great. And I have all these things to show her. And 16 Tech is one of those shining stars.
Yeah.
So she's an entrepreneur herself, and the ecosystem here that I can get on the phone and talk to the guys at Developer Town that have a small business in her field that they're partnering. And I was like, hey, let me introduce you to someone that is doing what you're doing in a different space, so you can share ideas. And in 3 days, I had a coffee meeting set up.
That's great.
And that is this whole narrative of Indianapolis is Hoosier friendly.
Sure.
Right? Businesses aren't competitive here; they're cooperative.
Right. And, there's been research that's done. The IEDC has done some great research recently that shows the value of that local connectedness, and it has a material impact on the startup journey. And we've got that in spades in Indianapolis, and that's also what we're creating here in 16 Tech as well.
I feel like you're creating a magnifying glass on something that's already really good for what we have here. Right? I've got clients on the East Coast and the West Coast, and they're just more guarded, right, than all of my clients that are here that are looking to integrate with as many friendly faces as they can, as early as they can. And I think in medium and large size businesses, it may be less important, but when you're a startup and when you're small, all you need are connections and help. It's going to be
Yeah.
that person that makes that introduction for you, that solves that problem you had, or fills the hire you're looking for, the third or second person on the team.
That's right.
That changes the direction of a startup from success to failure or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the spaces that we're developing at 16 Tech, and we can talk about the programs, but a big part of what we're doing is creating the resources that are de-risking that entrepreneurial or that innovation journey, and making them more visible, more accessible for people to access. My husband's a tech entrepreneur, and so I kind of go home to our target market in many respects on a nightly basis, and that's kind of the point of accountability between the two of us is, what did you do to de-risk the entrepreneurial journey for someone today? And that really does inform how I approach my work at 16 Tech and what makes me excited about the community that we're building.
No, that's awesome. I think for the viewers at home, let's run through what all of 16 Tech it is, because it is a whole lot more than just an idea.
Yeah, that's right.
What's really cool is it became a physical space that we're in, and that more stuff around us is coming up. So can you give us the elevator pitch on what all exists here and what is the higher level dream that we're heading?
Sure.
What is an innovation district? Because I know that you like to, that's the big word, right? But I think that took me a while. It's like, what does innovation district mean?
That's right.
What does that mean to you?
Very good, Drew.
Yeah.
We can start there. And, we have, we like telling people about 16 Tech, but it's important to recognize that we're building something where there is a bit of a playbook. What we're doing is not unique. It's new to our market and it's important, but it's also a proven model. And it takes different forms in different cities, but there's roughly 100 innovation districts around the world. And you can think about these as a backlash to the corporate office park, right? That's removed from an urban area, that's isolated. And so it encompasses the principles of what makes cities great, what attracts talent, placemaking, density, proximity, et cetera. And it combines companies of different sizes, of different industries, and brings together both academic researchers, industry researchers, startups, and corporations with this idea that when you create this mixing, melding pot, that's actually where ideas spark and where innovation forms. And so that's ultimately what we're creating. And so it is a place that's meant to attract talent, it's meant to attract business. And we want to make sure that not only are we creating the spaces for the type of work that's needed for the future, but we're also creating the programs and the ways for people to connect. So 16 Tech Community Corporation has a big mission. We're responsible for catalyzing the physical development of the district, and we could talk a lot about that as engineers yourselves.
Yep.
And the reason being is because the site that we're developing, the 50 acres, is the former site of the city's water infrastructure, the historical site. And so it's a very complicated site to develop, and that's effectively why it's remained undeveloped for so long. So we have the responsibility not just for catalyzing the physical development by putting in the public infrastructure, by self-developing some amenities, and then also attracting additional development. Our other role is this programmatic connection. What are we doing to make sure that people who locate in the district there's a value to them that goes beyond space? How are we connecting people who are in our Makerspace to people who are working over at EMC Squared, who are part of the Connexus network? And how do we connect people who are working around shared issues or shared problems and plug them into the broader ecosystem as well? And so those are the two things that really drive our work, is the combination of a place-based initiative, but one where we're really connecting people together.
Yeah, so I think let's dive right into the space and the place. So just to give everyone some insight, we bought our headquarters where we are now because 16 Tech was going in. We were originally looking at getting some space on the district, but you guys weren't going to be ready for us. We were getting kicked out of our last space. So we bought on the border, but made sure you guys got some of the match funding for us doing that because we believe in the mission, and that was so important to us, and that's why we did locate where we did.
Right, and we're glad to have you in the neighborhood and in the district.
So we just joked that we're growing the district one block at a time.
That's right.
And I think that for us, we bought into that idea and that dream of that connectedness because we are a hardware company, and all of our teams work together every day on physical things and in the same space. And we wanted that experience in a broader sense in the city we worked and lived in, and the partners we wanted to network with, both that could be clients, connectors, all the things in the district. So for us, having the space so close was a huge benefactor of why we wanted to be here. And I can tell you that I experience it every day. We'll start at AMP, the artisan marketplace here, where we go to lunch I don't know, 3 or 4 days a week because it's easy and it's close and there's so much choice.
Oftentimes I'm there breakfast and dinner too.
Right.
So yeah.
And it's so useful, not from the food perspective. You can run into someone that you've been meaning to ask 2 questions to that could have been an email, but it's way more personal to say hey and ask the 2 things you want to ask. And you're guaranteed to hit that network here if you're here, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, there are some people who wonder why we opened a food hall so early, but it is really essential to what we're building here. And in many respects, it's a front door to the district. We have lots of residents from the neighborhoods around the district who come to the AMP. Lunch is awesome. It's a melting pot. We see people from our hospitals. We see police officers, construction workers, firefighters, people who are working in the district.
The IEDC is always there.
Yes, yeah. So it really is a great place to come and experience 16 Tech, and for the companies that choose to locate here as well, it's a huge amenity and advantage to be able to walk out your door and have those options for eating, and that's something that means a lot.
It does, and I mean we've got a team of like 15 people, and if I want to take 5 of them to lunch, 5 of us agreeing on where to go is never going to happen.
Right.
So we just go to AMP and everyone get their own thing and meet at a table, and we can still have that lunch meeting that's both friendly and also like productive because you're going to talk about the problems you're facing that day, and it really allows and enables that frictionless transition into just going to lunch and getting back to work without having to travel across town or get out and go somewhere else. And that may only be 15 minutes at a time, but if that's every day on both directions, that adds up for a business with 5 people in the car.
Yeah.
So that calculus for me factored into us buying our building, where it was and why AMP was going to be there.
That's great.
So just giving that feedback that like 10 out of 10 would do again. Like that was a key glue that holds this all together.
Early on in the 16 Tech story, people would ask us where are my employees going to eat before we even had offices or spaces to build them. So we took away that excuse and we've brought some great amenities. And one of the things that's really important to underscore about the AMP, and I share this because as a nonprofit, 16 Tech Community Corporation thinks really deeply about how we go about our work and making sure that as we bring spaces or open projects that they reflect in our mission. And the AMP is an extension of that. Over 50% of the businesses that are there are new business concepts, and 65% are female or minority owned and operated. Approximately 7 have connections to the neighborhoods around 16 Tech. And so it's a really great way that we've expressed our mission but also bringing a key amenity to the district that's going to serve the companies and tenants that are here.
Yep, and not to bury the lead, but the food is really good for all of those that haven't had it yet.
It's great.
It is a great place to go.
Yeah.
So I think that's huge, and having the bar in the middle may have been, the ping pong table at the startup when people first thought about it, but you need that.
That's right.
You need the space. I was just at a happy hour where I ran into you last week again, because you need to have those events that people and other companies can host at your location and bring them in when they go somewhere else. They go to a brewery to host that happy hour somewhere else, but you can do that here on site.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's a big part of the reason why we put a stage in as well. I mean, we're using the stage right now for we have some spoken word events and we have some live music, and but we also envisioned the stage as a place where maybe someone would want to make some product announcement or a launch, and that it could be an amenity to the companies that were in the district as well. But what you're describing, Grant, this serendipity is a key piece of the overall value proposition for an innovation district where we started our conversation. And our team spent time during COVID thinking really deeply about not just how do we create the places where that will happen naturally, but how do we start accelerating those connections? How do we engineer the serendipity in the same way that we've engineered the roads and utilities, the infrastructure to the district? And that's something that we're still thinking about and launching ways to connect people in the district from communication tools, programs, events. But even with those intentional efforts, the serendipity happens on a daily basis. And whether it's at the bar or in line for coffee at Tinker, you see it, and it's really neat.
No, and I joke about this. We always take, guests we're showing to the AMP. I'm like, oh, we're going to run into someone that I'm meaning to talk to, or they're going to run into me, and I'm sorry. Like, haha, very funny. You're trying to sell me on, moving to Indiana, moving to this place. And 5 minutes later, we're in the middle of my slice of pizza from Fresco or whatnot, and I get tapped on the shoulder, and someone like Ben Reitzman from BIC is like, oh, hey, do you have 5 seconds to talk about XYZ? And my client's going to have to wait as that conversation because it's clockwork. Every single time you get that soft touch, that water cooler conversation that's natural, that you don't get with the work from home, the Zoom call, the Slack message, that you guys have engineered successfully, I think.
That's right. I mean, a big part of the conversation in the last couple years has focused on how work has changed, how the office has changed. And those things are true, and they're going to be evolving, and they're always evolving, frankly. I mean, it's a pendulum that kind of swings back and forth in terms of some of the trends. But what has not changed, and what I think people overlook when they talk about the changes in the office, is the need for physical places for talent to gather. That's still key. It's still really important. It affects some industries and some workplaces more than others, but it's still fundamental. It's really important for people who are early in their career, who are being exposed to new industries, mentorship, et cetera. And it's important too, whether it's for collaborating or certain types of works. And so when we think about 16 Tech, yes, we're building an innovation district, but really, one of my aspirations for 16 Tech is it is the place for people to come in Indianapolis. If you want to get connected to innovation, if you want to learn about entrepreneurship, 16 Tech's the front door for you. You come, and that's where you can get plugged into the opportunities, and you can get plugged into the various industry networks, et cetera.
Right. And I think the next thing I want to talk about in the physical space is the co-working space you guys have here at 16 Tech, because that was a new idea when Drew and I started in the entrepreneurial game, and we were out of my mom's basement kind of a team. But we would have loved to have that lower barrier to entry space we could go work out of every day and just be present in. We're going to be doing the same thing on our computers and design that we were in my mom's basement, but now I can do it in front of people that are much more connected than I am in the industry. And if I can ask 2 questions a week of, hey, what do you think about this idea, that are also in the co-working space, that could have been huge for us. And I see that happening whenever I walk through the co-working space, the cross-pollination that your members have with each other, with the 16 Tech team, again, with Tamara, who's now with us, and she's got us connected to all those people there, and they're asking questions, and it's this big, organic, friendly space that we didn't have access to. We had to, kind of start on our own and break out into the world when we were ready.
A lot of small companies talk about the concept of like fake it till you make it, right? And like in a way, I think co-working spaces like allow that, right? Like you have access to far superior conference rooms and office spaces, and
a mailing address,
a real one.
Coffee machines, right? That weren't, upstairs in the kitchen, right? Like I can assure you that trying to take vendor meetings at a residential place, especially with people that are 20 and 30 years your senior, convincing them to supply you with expensive parts and equipment and things is very difficult to do, right? Like would have been much easier if we could have like gotten dressed up and, driven down to 16 Tech and had that meeting, in a very nice conference room and, jazzed it up a little bit, right? Because when you're first starting out, like you don't have the capital like for any of that, right? And I think it's important both externally, like how you present yourself and like how you're, how people perceive you. But I also think like it's an internal thing, right? Sure. Like it's a confidence game. And I think like working in a space with other professionals in an environment that makes you feel like the work that you're doing is important, and it's in a nice space and not just at your desk in your bedroom, dimly lit. I think all those things matter because, again, a big part of those early days is like building up the amount of self-confidence that like the path that I'm on, the thing that I'm doing is like worth getting up and doing every single day, right?
Yeah. I think it's important to note that goes beyond the office space and the co-working space that we have at 16 Tech. I mean, that ultimately extends to Machyne, where we're having, the podcast right now, which is our Makerspace, and includes a variety of tools and resources for individuals or companies who are looking to prototype products. And, the other resource that we have in the district as well is shared wet labs for life sciences startups. And so it's not just about where you can meet, but it is about some of those tools that you need, the access to the resources early in an entrepreneurial journey, and making those accessible to people here at 16 Tech. And it's interesting because you mentioned how that would have been helpful to you when you started. One of the things that we're seeing is people are using the office, they're using our Makerspace, they're using the shared wet labs right now, much more like gym memberships, right? So again, it's this notion that yes, the way people are working has changed, but there are still some things that bring people together, resources that they need, and those are really great examples of the type of specialized spaces, flexible and customized spaces that we want to continue to bring to 16 Tech.
Yeah, and I had just got my first full tour of the wet labs last week or the week before, and it is incredible what they have available for rent on like a month by month basis. I mean, it is, if you were a startup that was in anywhere near the chemical or biological space, you couldn't do that at home.
No.
Maybe you could do
Actually,
that.
you couldn't do it anyplace else in central Indiana
Yeah,
either. It's really the only
Yeah.
shared wet labs that are available for life sciences. And one of the things that we're now thinking very deeply about in terms of our future development plans is, well, what happens when a company graduates from that space? It's not a formal accelerator program, but when they do need dedicated space or they need some office space, there's no place for them to go. And so that's another example of the type of resource, additional labs that we're pursuing and would like to bring to 16 Tech.
No, and I think that is the narrative. You just touched on the thing that an innovation district should strive to do, is graduate people maybe out of it. Right. And I think that's the cool story. I know that the Cream and Concrete team that graduated out of Machyne now has a space right, down the street from all of us. And that we're so happy that they successfully started in a small space, blew up, and they were wall to wall in there for a long time. And now they have their own space. And that is the success story of 16 Tech and what it enables people to do.
Yeah. I mean, our first success story really did come from our Makerspace, and it was bittersweet for us. But that's exactly what we're trying to do, is we're creating, especially in HQO, our innovation hub. I mean, this was meant to be a starting place for people on their journey, wherever that is. Now, whether they end up buying a building nearby, or maybe they take a larger office space in a future building in the district, that this was really intentionally meant to bring to the market what you might consider starter spaces, right? And what's interesting is that we were just frankly lucky that we brought this to the market, not only just really coming out of the pandemic. So inherent in these kind of starter spaces is flexibility, right? And we know that that's something that's really valued in the marketplace right now too.
No, for sure. And I think that the style and the breadth of space that you guys have is only mirrored by the style and the breadth of people you are bringing to the district that are the experts in the field, right? I can go talk to Nick Sturgeons if I have an IT security question, and he's got it figured out. And I can go talk to the guys at BIC that are with the IEDC about battery technology and innovation. And you're starting to breed this density of knowledge. EMC Squared is another great example that's in the district, where if you don't know someone already, all you have to do is ask someone in the district, and they're going to point you to two people that can probably answer your question or connect you to the guys that can.
Yeah. And what you're underscoring too is really some of the emerging R&D capabilities and strengths in the district as well. And so whether it's with the Indiana Biosciences Research Institute, whether it's EMC Squared and some hard tech related companies, those are areas where we're building some depth of talent and really an ecosystem right now that's pretty exciting.
No, and I can't mirror that sentiment enough, that it is very exciting. And the fact you can blend that with space, not only to start in, but to grow into, is super cool.
Yeah. One of the other important parts of that ecosystem, and something that it distinguishes 16 Tech from other innovation districts globally too, is the presence of 6 universities that we have here. So 16 Tech is also a place where universities can connect and collaborate with one another. And that's also important, especially as our university partners look to iterate on different models of education. And it's also a place where they can connect with industry, and then where their students can connect with industry early in their career as well. So we're really excited that we have multiple universities that have a presence here. And we're also really excited by the recent announcement at IUPUI and the changes that are going to be happening in downtown Indianapolis. We've got a great relationship with IUPUI. Their team uses the Makerspace quite a bit and has done some projects here. But we're really excited about what it's going to mean to have the additional investment from both universities, and what opportunities that's going to open up as well. In many respects, 16 Tech was designed and the land has been dedicated for the exact types of industry academic partnerships that are really going to be possible with what's happening at IUPUI in the future.
Right. No, and that I think is such a narrative about what we are. This is, where we're in is not just a private venture to turn a profit. It's not just a public work of good. This whole district is a partnership, private, public, everyone's involved to make it what it is. And I think that's the reason it can spread the line between just being ruthlessly efficient and being altruistically good, but still going to have the power behind it to grow and to continue to
Yeah.
really ramp.
Yeah, that's really important to mention. So we have a lot of support from the public sector, the city of Indianapolis, the state of Indiana. They've really been instrumental in helping fund the infrastructure for 16 Tech, as has the Lilly Endowment. And then we have significant support from individuals and corporations, other local foundations, which are helping fund the operations of 16 Tech Community Corporation. And one of the things that really excited me, going back to my why I joined 16 Tech, is that we're a nonprofit. Our mission is ultimately to help advance Indianapolis, right? To make Indianapolis a more competitive place, but we're also working to develop a sustainable business model ourselves. So the asset that we have is the land that we own. And by developing that land, hopefully we're creating a business model that will then be able to sustain the operations of 16 Tech Community Corporation. And so that's part of our own startup and entrepreneurial journey that we have. And the idea that could be done within the context of a nonprofit was something that was really curious to me and something that motivates me as well.
I think it's so important though. And I think a lot of times I think people can forget that component, like that sustainability, where it's, we have this idea, we want to do this good, we want to take this money, we want to invest it, we want to achieve these public good goals. And again, I think like that's totally noble and like people should continue to do that. But I also, like you were talking about, you have to figure out a way that how do you make that continue to have impact, not just one time, right? A lot of times, again, a city will get a grant, they'll spend the money, and maybe that has impact for 5 years or 10 years or whatever, right? Until either the infrastructure wears out or, it needs some form of reinvestment. But if you're able to take that money and not only do the thing that you set out to do, but set it on a path where it can sustain itself, it's got, built-in economic mechanisms to make sure that 16 Tech isn't just here for 10 or 15 years and then kind of like dwindles and dies, but really like can grow and sustain itself and, be here for, hopefully decades in the future. Right.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's an important thing that I don't know if everybody takes that component maybe as seriously. And I know that that's a big component that you guys have talked about from the beginning is how do we do this, but do it in a way that isn't just, this is a fad, this is a cool buzzword. We get some politicians elected and 10 years from now, people are like, well, oh yeah, I remember 16 Tech, like that thing that, they tried that or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And it was popular for a while. Like I do think that's a really important component to highlight.
Yeah, and it's part of going back to the creation of 16 Tech Community Corporation. This idea of an innovation district in Indianapolis has a lot of history, 20 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
And but it wasn't until the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership incubated and formed 16 Tech Community Corporation that there was an organization dedicated to overseeing the creation of an innovation district, and that organization had funding, right?
Right.
And so that was really a catalyst, and subsequently in these last 5 years, we've made tremendous progress on both the physical development and also this programmatic piece that we've been talking about as well. And another part of the 16 Tech model that was very intentionally designed from the beginning was the relationship that we have with the neighborhoods around the district. So we're located in the Riverside neighborhood, just off of Indiana Avenue in the near northwest. And the leases that we execute in the district, 20 cents per square foot of that goes to a community investment fund. And then we make grants on an annual basis to projects that are benefiting the quality of life in the neighborhoods around 16 Tech. And so it's part of what excites me, and it's part of kind of the thoughtfulness and comprehensiveness of the overall approach that we have right now.
There's lots of development that's neat to see in the area too, right? I mean, they're
that whole promenade is coming in.
Yeah, they're developing bike paths now
Yeah.
on along Riverside there. They're investing in the park infrastructure that already exists along there. Again, I mean, if you've ever driven up Riverside, I mean, there's fantastic spaces, green spaces that are all along there that, again, I think the plans are in place, again, over the next 10 or 15 years, but like really excited to see the investment just in the community as a whole, right? On the one end, like you've got the investments that are being made on the 16 Tech side and the pedestrian bridge that you guys are working on with that, but then also seeing the city kick in funding to sort of in the neighborhood expand and continue to invest in the parks and the green spaces and things like that around the area. It all is just, I think, is going to culminate in this really great investment in the total community, right? From start to end, right? From the economics and the job opportunities to the recreation and where you go when you're, done with work at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And take the kids, to go play baseball on the baseball diamonds, right?
Let's stick with that for just a second, because the Riverside Promenade and what's happening in Riverside Park is truly special. I mean, it's a wonderful asset. It's one of the largest municipal parks in the country. And the promenade has just been designed beautifully in a way that reflects the culture, history, and heritage of the neighborhoods around 16 Tech. It's been an inspiration for us in terms of some of our placemaking and public spaces that we're designing. But admittedly, 16 Tech feels a little bit like it's on an island. You might know this from some of your conversations. People still kind of wonder where it is. And that's going to fundamentally change in the next couple years. And the catalysts for that, Drew, which you mentioned, are one, the Riverside Promenade, but two, the extension of the Indianapolis Cultural Trail, which is coming to the base of a bridge that 16 Tech is getting ready to construct. And so one can ride their bicycle from 38th Street and start at Newfields and end up in Fountain Square, or take the trails out to the B&O Canal.
I ride from 116th Street down here frequently.
I mean,
and it's surprising that most of that trip, almost the entirety of it, is on dedicated pathways, right? I mean,
Right.
Monon to the towpath that runs along Butler's campus and Newfields down there, and it links up basically at Riverside, where again they're going to have a dedicated path, and that's going to extend into your district here with the cultural trail, like you said, like the linking of the public spaces, the development that 16 Tech is making, the development that the Riverside neighborhood is making in their parks, and then again all of that development that's gone on at Newfields, like it's really going to be great. I mean, when it's all done, I mean it's going to link into just this massive amount of amenity that you can take advantage of for literally like miles.
Right. And not just amenities, but the job opportunities that are here. I mean, oftentimes in community development and economic development, there's discussion around how there's a spatial mismatch between where jobs are located and where people live. And for the residents in the neighborhoods around 16 Tech, the investments that are being made in infrastructure, the investments that are being made here, and also the programs that we are developing to help ensure that people are aware of the opportunities and prepared for them are going to help address those types of mismatches. The other thing that I think is really cool, and I'm excited about it, when you talk about the vision for 16 Tech, is so I mentioned that we're kind of an island right now, but as this trail connectivity really comes together in these next couple years, 16 Tech is going to be a place where people are riding their bikes through on the weekend. And we're being very intentional about how we design some of our outdoor and public spaces, because just as we want 16 Tech to be a place where talent knows to come, that front door that I talked about earlier, when someone visits 16 Tech, we want them to know right away that we're an innovation district. And we are looking for ways in the public spaces that we design to make sure that there's inspiration opportunities. We're thinking about our central green as like a living laboratory where we can demonstrate and showcase some of the innovation that's happening in the district. We've also been really intentional about the design of the 16 Tech Bridge, which I'm not an engineer, and I was really surprised going through the design process for the 16 Tech Bridge to realize how many bridges are built today where the structure and the architecture are not integrated. So I love the Monon Trail, but those bridges are effectively, the glued on the side of a flat bridge, right? And so the bridge that we've designed for 16 Tech is one where the structure and the architecture are integrated, and it's a first of its kind engineering. And this is very subtle, but it's really important to us. I mean, hopefully someone's going to see that bridge and they might think, this is really cool. And by appreciating the structure of the bridge, it invites them to start thinking about how it might work. And so that's another example how we've just been very intentional in terms of the spaces that we're creating, where we want these inspiration opportunities for people, whether it's youth or someone else, but to be really thinking about the future, how things work, and 16 Tech being a place where all of that can happen.
No, for sure. And I think the other part of the dream for me that is the future plans that you guys have for 16 Tech is that mixed use that you're trying to blend in once the district is full of tech. Then you need to blend in more restaurants and maybe some residential nearby. And I think that, for me, that live, work, play in an area that will build a whole neighborhood up is that end dream that I think is so cool that we're marching towards.
Right. And 16 Tech's not meant to just be office space. We think about the development that we're catalyzing, and it is a mixed use plan. So we do have a residential project that will break ground here shortly. We expect to bring additional amenities and retail to the district, potentially additional residential as well. And overall, what we're trying to maintain is about a 60-40 split, 60% of the development in the district being what we consider innovation spaces. So various types of office spaces, flexible office spaces, additional maker spaces, and labs.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I think the one thing that I think is cool, I was talking with, I forget who it was within 16 Tech about that mixed use building lease space, right? Where you can do offices in front and light manufacturing out back, right? And I think that's blending that into the job opportunities of the neighborhood. That you don't need to just be an innovator to get benefit out of where this is all going. And I think that's going to lift that entire neighborhood up. And not just have job opportunities to support the innovation, but to be within it, even if you're not the innovator. I think that was such a cool narrative.
Yeah. I think it's also important to recognize that while this area was largely undeveloped, it's part of a legacy of innovation. And that starts with Indiana Avenue and the stories of Madam C.J. Walker and Jazz. One of our AMP tenants, her grandfather was the first person to own a liquor store on Indiana Avenue. And as you get to understand the history of this area in particular, there were a lot of people, because of the river and the creek, so it's kind of an undesirable area. In the past with mosquitoes, et cetera. And so you had people, whether they were persons of color or whether they were different classes of immigrants that were really setting up their place of business, their lives on Indiana Avenue in this area. And so there is this history of innovation and entrepreneurship that we're building on. We're not just creating from the ground up here. And that's something that we look really intentionally about celebrating as well.
No, they were doing local NPR stations doing a big push on the Madam C.J. Walker story in the news this month, and it's funny that all these stories do all tie together.
They do,
right?
Yeah.
So it's cool to see the Hoosier City growing and both coming from the history, moving it forward, and doing what we can to not lose sight of where we came from, but push forward and make these really cool new things.
That's right.
Yeah. So no, I think the story is really cool. I mean, it's still unfolding, and I think that's the best part about it, right? I really do think it has this feeling of like 16 Tech is just getting started, right? Like we're really still in the infancy of the entire like plan, right? So I think both Grant and I are excited to see where it goes, and honestly be kind of hopefully a part of it all, as it unfolds, and continue to interact and benefit from all the great things and work that you're doing. So
well, we're really excited as well. It's really just been within the last 12 to 18 months that 16 Tech has gone from an aspirational place to an active one, and so we have 3 buildings. We've got over 60 companies. There's more than 500 people who are working in the district on a daily basis, and that's really just the starting point. And so we're excited about what we're going to be able to continue to contribute to the ecosystem and what it's going to mean for Indianapolis.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Emily, for
You're
joining
welcome.
us today. And hopefully we'll sit down and do this again in the future.
Yeah, I'd
and
love
we can
that.
maybe do like an update episode.
Sure,
So,
that's right.
But
That's
yeah,
right.
no,
Well, thanks
definitely
very much.
appreciate
We're
it.
really excited. Thanks for believing in the 16 Tech vision. So you are one of our early adapters, and we're glad to have been a small part of the story of Glassboard. So thanks.
No, awesome. Thank
That's
you.
fantastic. Okay,
great.
everybody, we'll catch you in the next one.
All right. Thanks.